Kiba lunged at Lady Q, moving so fast that she looked like a blur, rushing past the other kids, and onto Lady Q. The enraged vampire girl raised her arm up and aimed it right at Lady Q's heart. But before she could land the killing blow on her unconscious prey, she was grabbed by one of Kaiosei's tendrils, and thrown far away into the air. Fu then grabbed Lady Q and brought her to them, before looking at the others. "What the hell happened to Kiba?" Ken asked, his eyes still wide in shock at having seen Kiba move so quickly. "I don't know, I've never seen her like this," Fu told them, before shaking his head. "But whatever this is, Kiba doesn't seem like she's in control of herself. We have to calm her down." Kill lol. Thud. Everyone looked behind them, to see that Kiba had already returned from wherever Fu had thrown her. Before Kiba could move, Nara kneeled down and raised up a bunch of crystals around Kiba. This held her for all of 1 second, as Kiba immediately rushed through the crystal barrier, right at them. Sansan rushed forward and wrapped her body around Kiba, to try and slow her down, but Kiba literally went right through her, tearing a hole in Sansan's body as she continued on her path towards Lady Q. She reached the half-dead villain, but before she could attack, Rhino kicked her away, sending Kiba flying back. Kiba rolled through the air, sailing a few inches above the ground, before digging her fingers into the ground, and slowing herself, before she lunged back at the group. Rhino charged forward, but Kiba just rushed past its legs, knocking it onto its face, as she continued to go after Lady Q. Fu sent out more of Kaiosei's tendrils and tried to hold Kiba down for a second, but she was too strong, and just kept moving towards Lady Q. Rag! Ken pushed himself away from his sister, and punched the ground as hard as he could, breaking it up, and causing Kiba to trip, but Kiba then just started crawling towards them, like a feral animal. Slam! That's when Sansan came back, having turned herself into a massive hammer, stretching high into the sky, before coming down on Kiba, with such great force it cratered the ground around them. But Kiba just jumped through Sansan's hammer, launching herself extremely high up in the air. Kiba aimed herself at Lady Q, and fell back to the ground. Nara tried shooting more crystal shards at her, but they did absolutely nothing, breaking instantly when they hit her skin. As Kiba got closer, Ken jumped up, past Kiba, and then grabbed her leg, before bringing her down, and slamming her body into the ground as hard as he could, breaking apart the brickwork and causing dirt to fly up. This evidently did no damage to Kiba whatsoever, and she immediately yanked her foot out of Ken's hand. She then proceeded to turn around, lunge at Ken, and punch him dead center in the chest. Shum! The punch Kiba gave was so strong, that it created a gust of wind around it, and everyone could hear Ken's bones break as he flew back. Crash! Ken smashed through the side of the house, landing in the inside sports room, unconscious on his back, and in a flash of green Ken returned to his normal form, blood spilling from his mouth. Ken! Nara screamed out in horror, but before she could run over to her brother, Kiba charged once again. Shiruka tried to shoot webs at her, but Kiba was too fast and all of her shots missed. Fu and Sansan sent out as many tendrils as they could, creating a wall to try and grab onto Kiba and slow her down. This did barely anything, as Kiba rushed through them, only slowing down by a tiny sliver before making it to Fu, who was standing in front of Lady Q. And Kiba moved through him, splatting Fu's body all across the floor. Once again, Kiba was in front of Lady Q, but before she could reach her, Rhino charged in, and grabbed her, scooping her up and running a few yards away, before planting her on his chest, and falling on top of her. "Just stay down already. Murder is more trouble than it's worth," aka shouted at Kiba. "You've already tortured her well enough, so calm yourself." Kiba, evidently, did not calm herself, as she proceeded to kick Rhino off of her, sending the Nomu, who weighed several tons, flying into the air, before crashing down a few yards away onto his back. As Kiba was getting up, Nara stood in front of Lady Q and unleashed a wave of massive crystals at her, to try and push her back. "Kill lol!" Kiba screamed before she rushed forward, punching through each of the crystals at a terrifying pace, reaching Nara. Kiba then punched a massive hole through her chest and leapt through it. Nara didn't even have time to feel shocked before she was engulfed in pink light and transformed into Wildvine. The hole in her chest quickly healed, and then Nara collapsed, and in another flash, she was back in her human form, unconscious and pale. Kiba meanwhile was now once again closing in on Lady Q, her fangs bared and ready to rip the woman's head off. And then she went limp. Kiba's body landed limply onto Lady Q. Her hair began to fade back into white, Her nails receded back to normal, and turned back into their normal colors, her muscles shrank and her veins receded, as did her fangs. Lastly, the red cleared from the whites of her eyes, before they closed, leaving her unconscious. She passed out, aka said as she ran over to Kiba, taking a closer look at her unconscious body, along with Sansan. Is it just me, or does she look slightly too pale? It's not just you. Fu came over, having grown back everything but his legs, and was using Kyoshi-I's tendrils to keep him up. Her blood tanks are low. Dangerously low. Fu then ripped off one of his arms, held it over Kiba's mouth, and let the blood flow into her. My guess is that whatever this new form was, it used up all the blood Kiba had stored up, way faster than usual, to make her more powerful. Theoise waiter, we have to save everyone, Sansan said, grabbing a hold of Nara, Mu, who had passed out from the pain by now, and Nara. You're right. Fu grabbed Kiba and the villain. We need to get them to Izuku. Shiruka told them. I'm not sure how he can help, but it's the best we can do. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Gami would just keep filling the room back up, every time the number of Ravagers started getting too low. Yami himself was currently hiding behind a bookshelf, patiently waiting for the 9 minutes to be up. "Well, it looks like you've done it," Gami said as it got closer and closer to being 9 minutes. "You guys really are strong, huh? When time is up, you be weak. Ravagers tear you apart. Surrender," Yami told him. Gami smiled. "Very well then." Then Gami turned his scythe arm back into a normal arm and raised both his arms up to surrender. Yami peeked his head out from the shelf, parting the swarm of Ravagers slightly, so he could see that Gami had properly surrendered. Once he confirmed this, Yami ran out from behind the shelf, parted the Ravagers further, and then shot out one of the licker's tongues at Gami. The tongue wrapped around Gami's body, restraining him completely. As Yami went up to Gami, he saw that Gami was still smiling. "Why smile? You lost?" Yami asked, very confused as to Gami's attitude. And then, Gami started to change. Their body morphed a bit, not too much, but he became more feminine. Their features softened, and they became a bit slimmer. Yami also immediately noticed an explosion of emotions within them as the smirk on Gami's face vanished and was replaced with a look of nervous fear. "Oh, this is always so unpleasant." Gami cringed, their voice sounding way more feminine than before. Gami then turned their attention back to Yami. "You hi?" Yami raised an eyebrow. "Explain." XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Netsu was nearly hyperventilating, struggling to breathe as he burned more and more oxygen. Gammy suddenly smirked. "Well, it looks like you made it. Congratulations." "Huh?" Netsu gave him a confused look, very weirded out by his enemy congratulating him. But then, Gammy's body started to change. Snakes grew out of their head, their face became less pale, their body less masculine, and clothes began to appear over them until Kay had finally returned. "Oh wow." Kay groaned, falling onto her knees, clutching her head. Meanwhile, Netsu finally was able to let down his firewall and rushed out of the room trying to get some more air. It stayed like this for a while, Kay clutching her head, while Netsu was catching his breath in the hallway. Eventually, Kay's headache died down enough for her to pull herself onto her feet. "Netsu, I have something really important to tell Dad. But we need to go now before I forget." "Oh okay," Netsu said, still trying to catch his breath. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Gammy, who was trying to cover up her naked body, who was no longer bounded, and standing right beside them, much to the surprise of Fu's group, who stopped cautiously a few feet away from them. What happened? Kay gasped, when she saw Nara, Ken, Mu, Kiba, and Lady Q. It's a long story, Fu told them, before looking over at Gammy, who blushed and hid behind Kay. What's with them? They're on our side, Kay told them firmly, much to the other side's confusion. Just trust me. Yami nodded, confirming that he believed her. Then, the door opened up, with Izuku on the other side. Come quickly. All the kids flooded in, and Izuku quickly closed the door behind them. What's he doing here? Fuku gasped, pointing at Gammy. And why are they a girl now? I'm actually a girl, I just turned myself into a boy for well, it's complicated. Dammy explained, her face very red. Please call me Sheena when I'm in this state. It's nice to meet you all. The room was silent, all of the kids except Fu, Kei, Yami, and Netsu glaring at her, making Sheena shrink behind Kei once again. Everyone, we can focus on that later, Izuku told them firmly. Please set down all the injured ones in front of me. Fu nodded, and his group set down Ken, Nara, Mu, Kiba, and Lady Q. Kiba, Mu. Fuku went over to look at her two friends unconscious and injured-bodied, tears spilling from her eyes. Why? Izuku first looked over Lady Q, as her injuries were the worst, by far. Honestly, it's a miracle this woman is still alive. If it weren't for her quirk desperately trying to keep her alive, she'd already be dead. Netsu, can you come over here and burn her injuries? It'll cauterize the wounds. I'm not sure if it'll save her, but it's the best we can do right now. Alright. Netsu agreed, his head still aching from oxygen deprivation, but he did as he was told, heading over to Lady Q, and burning her wounds shut. While he did that, Izuku went over to Kiba and looked over her. She's gonna be okay, right? Fuku asked Izuku, her tone had more denial in it than it did hope. She won't die. But she's not gonna be waking up for a while. Izuku told her, his own voice sounding stern and serious, as he pushed back their overwhelming amount of anger and sadness, to better handle the situation. Whatever that form she entered was, it took a toll on her. Not to mention all the wounds this woman inflicted on her. Damn villain. AKA cursed. Wait, you saw her in that form? Shiruka asked, confused as to how Izuku knew about Kiba's transformation despite having been in this room the whole time. Izuku nodded. I saw everything using the cameras and the seers. Well, not everything. I still don't know the situation with Sheena, but we can get to that later. For now, Netsu, please seal her wounds shut as well. Netsu nodded, finishing up with Q before going on to Kiba, and burning the gashes in her body. Izuku then moved on to Nara. She looks okay, she's just exhausted. My guess is that when Kiba made a hole in her chest dash. Kiba did what? Netsu asked, in pure shock. Kiba punched a hole in her chest, but my guess is that Nara's quirk reacted, forcefully transforming her into Wildvine to repair the damage before she died. Izuku theorized. But switching from transformation to transformation must a toll on her. There's nothing we can do right now, other than giving her some time to rest and get her to a hospital as soon as this is over. Izuku then moved on to Ken, whose breathing was labored, blood was still coming out of his mouth, and his face was still heavily burnt from the goblin's fire breath. As for Ken, I'm not sure exactly, but Kiba likely broke a few of his ribs, he might even be bleeding internally. And the burns. Damn it, he needs immediate medical attention, but there's no way to get him out of here in time. Damn me, I should have hired a nurse by now. Then, he looked over at Mu. And Mu. Most of his hand is gone, damn it. While Izuku was looking over the injured, Eri just stood in the back, watching, her fist tightening more and more with each person Izuku assessed. And maybe I can turn Ken to stone, so he'll be frozen until we can get him to a hospital, Kei suggested. That might work, but we'll have to get his eyes open, Izuku said. I'm so sorry, Sheena said, causing everyone to look over at her, as she hung her head in shame. I could have stopped all of this from happening if only I'd killed my stupidity. There was a short pause after that before Izuku got up and walked towards her, moving Kei aside gently, and then kneeling down to look at her face to face. I would like you to explain yourself, please. Okay. Sheena took a deep breath, before looking back up at Izuku nervously. And my name is Sheena. And I work for the MLA, the Meta Liberation Army. Or at least I was forced to. What's a Meta Liberation Army? Kei asked curiously. It was a large group of people who believed that quirks should dominate society. They believed that quirks should be free to use as people pleased, and many people within that group were quirk supremacists, who believed that a person's quirk should dictate their role in society. Izuku explained. Some even believed that people with villainous quirks or the quirkless should be killed, for the sake of ensuring their genes don't pass on to others. They were supposed to have been destroyed a long time ago, but it's fully possible that someone else brought it back. And if that's the case, it would explain who's been trying to kill me for all this time. So these are the same people that sent Nies, and that gunman, Fu concluded. Sheena nodded. They've really wanted you dead a while. The thought of quirkless having power over people with powerful quirks, or having power at all, makes them really angry. So it's an army of quirkist scum? AKA spat. TCH. When I get my hands on them I swear they will regret what they've done. My parents were a part of the MLA and forced me to be too. Sheena continued her explanation, with a saddened look on her face. When my quirk came in, more powerful members took interest in me. And they wanted me to take people's lives. Once again, Izuka fought the rising feelings of anger, sadness, and utter disgust. Right now, he needed to hear Sheena's explanation out, all the way through, as quickly as possible. I didn't want to do it. I couldn't do it. Taking a life makes me sick. Sheena admitted, her face going slightly green as she was no doubt thinking about the people she was forced to kill. But then, they made me become Gammy. They told me to kill my emotions, my ethics, and my gender. I think that last one was just because they wanted a boy, but they made me do it anyway. And so, after I do all that, I can take a life. But you still feel the disgust after you turn back, Izuka said. Sheena nodded, looking away from Izuku, so he couldn't see the guilt in her eyes. I wanted to stop, but they wouldn't let me. They said that this was all for my sake, that I was creating a better world for people like me. But they're just liars. They just want a better world for themselves. I've been looking for a way out for a long time now, and when I heard about this place I knew that this was my chance. You're taking in strong kids with no parents. And my parents are dead to me, so I thought, if I helped you, you'd take me in and protect me from the MLA. Then why did you attack us? Fu asked, crossing his arm and giving her a confused look. Sheena looked down again. Well, when I'm Gammy. Sometimes I don't do things I normally would. I saw all the powerful forces on the villain's side, and Gammy decided that I needed to test you to see if you could actually win this. Because I betrayed them and we lost. I can't imagine what the consequences would be, Izuka said, finishing her sentence, before putting an arm on her shoulder. It's okay. I get it. You weren't yourself, or rather you were forced to become something that's not yourself. I can't blame you any more than I can blame Kiba for going berserk. But I could have done something, even if I just remembered to kill my own stupidity. I could have realized that I was making our side weaker, Sheena said tearfully, rubbing her skull-like eyes to get rid of the tears. I'm so stupid. Speaking of our side, we need to go back out there, Fu said. Izuka turned around to face Fu and was about to open his mouth when Fu sent one of Kyosei's tendrils out and grabbed the seer that was in the room. Show us what's happening outside. The seer did as instructed, and everyone crowded around it to see. Sai was struggling against the combined force of Kurogiri and Konoshur. Konoshur unleashed a bolt of energy at Sai, who dodged it, only for Kurogiri to open a portal behind her, and then above her, consuming the energy bolt and transferring it so it struck Sai. Ah! Sai screamed in pain, as the energy hit her. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked exhausted, breathing heavily, as Weaver approached him with a grin. "Aw, all popped out, mister?" Weaver giggled. "Why don't I help you take a nap?" Kai was currently fighting Hood and getting beat to hell, his body covered in bruises, and many of his scales having been knocked off him, as Hood flew around him at overwhelming speeds, and smacked him repeatedly. Sori was currently on the defensive for once, as she leaped forward to avoid Hit, attacking her from behind, only for Hit to show up behind her again, as soon as she landed, once again trying to attack her, but Sori barely managed to dodge, by dashing to the side, this time Hit not following. It seems Sori had finally gotten some grasp of Hit's quirk, but she was also covered in bruises, and blood was leaking from her mouth, while Hit didn't have a scratch on him. So the battle was still very much in his favor. Lastly, All Might and Ruin were charging at each other, but Janemba's arms grabbed All Might's arms, and held him back, taking All Might by surprise, and allowing Ruin to get in a blow to the face. Ag! All Might yelled as blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. The hit sent him flying to the side. That thing beat the hound, Yami noted. Kai's getting beat up by that flying hooded thing. Kay cried. Even All Might struggling, Netsu said, shocked to see the number 1 hero on the back foot. Now show us 1A, Fu ordered. The seer changed the image to show 1A fighting the former Yakuza members in the entry hall. Kirishima, Su, and Achiko were fighting against Rappa. Achiko tried to attack him from above, but Rappa unleashed a flurry of punches above his head, and sent Achiko flying into the ceiling. Meanwhile, Kirishima and Su came at him from the front and from behind, but Rappa just punched them both back. Todoroki, Tokoyami, Mineta, and Ida were currently facing off against Rikiya. Todoroki sent out a wave of ice at the massive villain, but he just punched through it all, and Todoroki had to move back with his ice to avoid Rikiya's fist slamming him into the ground. Dark Shadow charged at him, but Rukia just backhanded it away, before raising his hand up to his face, to block some balls that Mineta was throwing at him from above. Rukia tore a chunk out of the wall and threw it at Mineta, but Ida managed to get him out of the way before it hit him. Ojiro and Aoyama were fighting Coronostasis, Ojiro jumping around to avoid Chrono's hair attacks, while Aoyama took pot shots at Chrono, but the villain easily dodged Aoyama's attacks. Meanwhile, Sato, Shoji, and Siro were trying to fight off against Setsuno, Tabe, and Hojo. Shoji made multiple arms and unleashed them to try and hit Setsuno, but Hojo jumped in front of him, defending his friend with his crystal-covered arms, nullifying Shoji's attack, before Tabe came in, and started devouring Shoji's arm, running towards the multi-limbed boy, as he ate up his arms. Siro tried to shoot tape at Tabe, but Setsuno stole the tape out of his arm. Tabe got closer and closer to Shoji, his maw threatening to bite into the boy's chest, but then Sato came in and punched Tabe back. And while all this was going on, Momo and Jiro were on the side, Jiro having had her support items stolen by Setsuno, so she was helping Momo tend to the wounded, Kota, Mina, Kaminari, and Toru. Izuku could clearly see that things weren't going well. At this rate, if nothing changed then their side would lose. Dad, I know you want to keep us safe, but if they go down, then we're screwed, Fu told him. Those doors won't be able to protect us, not when they have someone who can open portals as he pleases. We need to help them win. It's our only hope. Izuku knew he was right, but he couldn't help but argue. But you're all weakened. Ken, Nara, Kiba, and Mu are all out of commission. Netsu is still recovering from oxygen deprivation. You've used up a good amount of your meat storage. Shiroka's exhausted. The only ones who are still in good shape are Sansan, aka Yami, and Shina. I know, but we don't have a choice. Fu reiterated. Sniff. I'm sorry. Suddenly, everyone turned their attention to Eri at the back of the room, who was now crying tears of frustration and self-loathing. If I could just control my quirk. Eri sobbed. I could fix this. I'm sorry. Immediately, Izuku, Fuku, Kei, and Kyoku all went over and hugged Eri. It's okay, Izuku told her. You've been trying your best to get control over your quirk. We know you have. It's not your fault. I wish I had a quirk, so that way I could defend you all and not just sit on the side. I'm sorry. Actually, Shina spoke up, getting everyone's attention. I can help with both of those problems.